people are recognizing that this is such a crucial moment for Canada, and they are recognizing that our party is the party to fight for Canada. They're also recognizing, by the way, Pierre Poilievre is not the guy who can do it.
The Liberals have an amazing new plan to really stick it to Trump and promote Team Canada. And shockingly, they actually got roasted over this on CTV News. We're going to be sharing that. Not quite sure what this strategy is, but it sounds terrible. And here's one that mainstream media will not report on. A new overreach by the Trudeau government that is effective today. Also, Band-Aids. Yeah, they don't heal deep wounds. We have some updates from Statistics Canada, from the bank, in terms of inflation and the GST holiday. And while we're at it, we may as well do some myth busting here about Mark Carney, his carbon tariff, Mark Carney being a complete liar, demon, fraud. I don't know. We'll get into all of that. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment your thoughts down below, and of course, give me a follow on other social media platforms as well.
It still sounds to me, though, that there's an opportunity for companies to pass that on to consumers.
Well, just to be clear, them buying credits reduces their costs. It helps Canadians reduce their own emissions. Now, take a big step back.
We're going to get into what Donald Trump's former strategist in his first administration, I believe he was the strategist for 7 months of Donald Trump's first administration, what he had to say about Mark Carney's proposal. But just to kind of sum it all up for you, Mark Carney has said that he's not getting rid of the carbon tax. No, he's just changing the name of the carbon tax. And he's going to have a hidden industrial carbon tax and then also a carbon tariff on imports. And here's just what some of the facts of the matter are. A carbon tariff is not going to reduce emissions, and it's not going to pressure other nations, 70% of which do not have a carbon tax of their own and don't particularly care about Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau's globalist agenda from the WEF. It's not going to do anything to them to help them reduce their carbon footprint. All it's going to do is raise prices and also isolate Canada even more from business overseas.
It might be having the reverse outcome of what he wanted, because Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was looking like he was going to form the next government. Now anger over this has a Mark Carney-led Liberal government tied or leading. And you could end up with a very left-wing environmental zealot who will win by campaigning against
a very left-wing environmental zealot like the government you've had will only lead Canada more rapidly to the edge of the abyss. Right? These people are radicals. They have these bizarre economic theories.
So he wants a carbon tariff on anything that comes from a country that doesn't have it. What would the reaction be in Washington to Canada saying, if your climate plan's not good enough, and the American one would not be good enough for Mark Carney, what would the reaction be to Canada putting a carbon tariff on every import that we have from you?
I think it would be a complete rethinking here in the country about what our relationship is with Canada. I think that if you did that, you would essentially say that we're a hostile power. I think it would be reviewed by the American people as that. And I think it would be reviewed by people in Washington as that. And I think it would be reviewed by President Trump as that.
I think we can all certainly agree at this point in time that the Liberals do have absolutely a WEF-backed agenda, the same agenda that has completely destroyed the UK, the same agenda that has made so many citizens of nations move to places like the USA because they just can't deal with it anymore. It seems like we're a part of this really big social experiment. And the Liberals have very frequently been creating attack ads against Donald Trump, comparing him to Pierre Poilievre. It's just like this classless fear-mongering at its finest. Like, imagine being a country who is under threat by somebody far more powerful than you, and you think it's a good idea to start mocking the leader of that country who is threatening you. Like, absolutely treacherous diplomacy. It is so weak to villainize the American people and American government like that for their own gain. But the biggest question I have is it working?
The Liberal Party is also sharpening its attacks against Poilievre, putting out ads like this one.
Everything is broken.
Everything is broken.
Fake news.
Fake news.
The left-wing censorship regime.
Their woke censorship ideology.
It appears that, yeah, it is actually working. You have Canadians who are allegedly canceling their trips. The rhetoric online has been crazy about all of this stuff. And I really have only come to the conclusion that the Liberals want to isolate Canada. They want to destroy our economy and radicalize our people, very similarly to the early days in North Korea and how that propaganda started. And if you don't believe me there, you think that's crazy, go do some research. There's a lot of parallels that I'm at a position now. It is impossible for me not to draw. I used to be very hesitant about theories like this because they sounded so radical. And I would say it's probably a conspiracy theory. There's got to be another side here. But the more that Team Canada shows us with their actions who they are, not their words. They say all kinds of crazy things that sound really good, but what they do is what matters. And what have they done over the last 9 years? What they've done is made me feel more confident than ever that there is something very, very dark in store for us if they win.
You know, I won't be the first to say this. He's always had an inflated lead because people dislike Trudeau. It's not that they liked him. And now that you have that out of the way and that you have the carbon tax out of the way, people are starting to remember, oh, this is the guy who convorted with the convoy in Ottawa. This is the guy who only gave an interview to Jordan Peterson at the end of the year. Some of these things are becoming more and more uncomfortable. And the more he can't resist his instinct to just not help himself and just be a little nasty, I don't think that that's what we need right now. And it makes him look like an opposition leader, not a prime minister.
You know, it's so funny, and it's just propaganda, it is, because anybody that has actually taken the time to listen to Jordan Peterson knows who he is, what he represents. And there's a lot of Canadians that really, really like him. There's a lot of Canadians who he has really helped pull out of some dark places with his wisdom and words and advice. And that interview with Jordan Peterson was such a raging success. And there was nothing in it that anybody could really say anything bad about unless they took things out of context or did something kind of misleading in order to say something bad about it. Pierre Poilievre in that interview was absolutely epic. He was sharp. He was on it. And you always hear this rhetoric as well of people saying, oh, well, you know, Pierre Poilievre, he has a bad demeanor and he's just immature and calling people out. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of his job as an opposition leader. And I'm always stuck with this feeling, and I hear this a lot, especially from women who say that the reason why they don't like Pierre Poilievre is because of their perception of him, that he is rude, or that he's mean. And I always or that he's really negative. That's another one, a really big one, that he's just so negative all the time. And I'm like, that's the job of an opposition leader, is to call out the things that the government is doing that is bad. And also, are you mad at him for being the one who is putting words to what is going on that are very negative and disastrous for this country, when you should be more mad at the people in charge who are making those bad decisions? Like, it's such a misplaced and convoluted way to redirect where your frustration and anger actually is. Having a politician who's saying, yeah, this is really messed up and wrong, you should be held to account, government, doesn't make him a bad person. That makes him really good at what his job is. I also have this school of thought that if that is the reaction to Pierre Poilievre calling out the current administration and refusing to let them off the hook, and that people say that that makes them not like him, it almost kind of signals to how weak our politics has become and how much people just want to live in this little fantasy world instead of actually talking about the real things that are really affecting us.
Shakira, how difficult does that become when you have the Liberals rolling out ads that are literally putting clips back to back of, Donald Trump saying common sense and then Pierre Poilievre saying common sense, or saying the woke left, and the two of them sort of, echoing each other? How difficult is it for him to try and run away from his past when you have opposition parties, or I shouldn't say opposition parties, when you have other parties putting those out.
I have to jump in again very quickly because it's like you're comparing Donald Trump and Poilievre for some of the things that they're saying, but the things that they're saying are very common words to describe what a lot of countries in the West are feeling. So you have people across the world who are rejecting mass immigration, rejecting all of this woke ideology. And that's what it's called. It's woke ideology, right? And so to say, oh, well, because Donald Trump said it, that's because Pierre Poilievre obviously worships at the altar of Trump. It's like, no, that's what these things are called. And it's things that many Canadians are also frustrated by and tired of.
Truthfully, I think it's very lazy for people on the progressive side of the spectrum to compare Poilievre and Trump. I mean, they've been comparing every conservative leader to Donald Trump since he became prime minister, and it just hasn't been working. So I'm not sure Canadians are going to buy that. But just on to some of those earlier points that were mentioned, that there's no policy differences between the Conservatives and the Liberals or Mark Carney. I mean, listen, axing the tax is something that Pierre has said since day one. We can sit here and say all the Liberal candidates have said that, but they haven't, right? Mark Carney said that to start, and then he says, we're just going to change the carbon tax. And then last week, he admits that, I'm going to keep the tax, but it's just going to be a marginal cost on Canadians. We're not even sure what that marginal cost looks like. So I think we need to be factually correct on what these leadership candidates are actually saying to Canadians, because there are differences. You have Liberal cabinet ministers now, like Minister LeBlanc, who, all of a sudden they want to do a review of government spending and the size of government. I think, again, Canadians aren't fools. They're not going to sit here and think the Liberals all of a sudden woke up and, oh, my goodness, all our policies are wrong. All our policies are incorrect. Look how unpopular we are. We're going to do all these things. I think one that'll be on the ballot in the next election is trust, and who you actually going to trust implement the things that they're saying they're going to do. And it's going to be a hard time for the Liberals to convince Canadians. They're going to do all these policies that the Conservatives have been asking for the last 9 years. All of a sudden, they're going to, win the election and do all these things. I doubt Canadians are going to think the Liberals are going to do a 180 in all these policies. So if trust is on the ballot, there's no way the Liberals are going to be convincing.
On that note, I actually came across this that I thought was very eye-opening and so not very surprising. Mark Carney, when he was on with Rosie and then also at one of his events that he held, one of his rallies, I guess you could call them, he had said how the government is going to be building all of this. We're going to use emergency powers to build all of this stuff, even if anybody opposes it. And then somebody took his French interview and compared what he was saying in terms of pipelines. So here's that.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Mais donc, vous n'imposeriez jamais un pipeline au Québec ou à d'autres
N'imposerez jamais.
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 Si une province dit non, vous passez pas de tuyau.
Ouais, absolument.
Vous n'imposez
jamais
pas.
au Québec.
So, yeah, I don't know. Are Canadians that foolish? I like to think not, but I really don't know at this point in time. What do you think about that? I wanted to also jump to this. Inflation has gone back up to 1.9% in January after a rise in gas prices. And the reason why I think this is very important to note is prices did in fact go down, and the Liberals kept touting this, and they went down during the tax holiday, the GST tax holiday. It was just another one of those little tricks that they did. And remember again how much they brainwashed and manipulated people into thinking that this was something so amazing to make prices look lower for a very short period of time, even though the cost of everything is still rising. The GST holiday meant that headline inflation remained below the 2% target in January, but there is clear evidence that underlying inflation pressures are building. This is the Deputy Chief North American Economist at Capital Economics, in a note that he sent to clients. And it went on to say, that suggests the Bank of Canada is getting close to the end of its loosening cycle, although the outlook for monetary policy ultimately hinges on whether President President Donald Trump imposes tariffs or not. So what does this mean for the future? Short-term prices are going to start rising again now that the tax break is over. The Bank of Canada also may stop lowering interest rates, meaning that borrowing money is not going to get any cheaper if you plan on getting a mortgage anytime soon. And the Trump factor obviously is a big deal because things are going to get way more expensive. And in this article on CTV, the Bank of Canada essentially said that they may have to be increasing interest rates to try to fight the inflation after this tax trick and then on to the tariff.
People are recognizing that this is such a crucial moment for Canada, and they are recognizing that our party is the party to fight for Canada. They're also recognizing, by the way, Pierre Poilievre is not the guy who can do it. He is maple syrup MAGA. All he wants to do is imitate Trump, and I don't think Canadians trust him to stand up to Trump. And so I think that's giving us a lot of energy, and that's why I'm really putting myself forward as the person, as the woman who can do it.
And I don't know, has the Liberal government radically shifted their stance? Well, we can take a look at this as well. As of February 15th, federally regulated banks, insurance companies, and trust firms must report the number of women, Indigenous people, visible minorities, and persons with disabilities in leadership roles, along with their policies and targets for increasing those numbers, aka DEI. It's basically a comply or explain mandate, and it is literally nothing other than you have to do this, otherwise we are going to sanction you. And the thing about this that's really unfortunate is all of these businesses should definitely have their main focus being on doing a good job for our economy right now, you know, having better services, having more stability financially, instead of having the Trudeau government on February 15th reiterate to them that nope, your biggest project, your biggest priority right now should actually be the government-mandated identity quotas.
When it comes to Africa, we've been investing more than $4 billion in Africa over the last 5 years. Canada is present and will continue to be present. And contrary to certain countries, we believe that international aid is important and will continue to invest in it.
So what do you think about all of this? Have the Liberals really changed? And more than that, do you think the average Canadian is buying it? My observations are yes, I do, which is very unfortunate. So we have a lot of work to do, Conservatives, because we can't go on like this anymore. We really can't. Canada is broken, and that's why we need Canada First to fix it and for our nation to heal. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Oh yeah, and also give me a follow on other social media platforms as well.